Whoa! It's The Illusion for a book review on Isaac's Storm by Erik Larson. This is a good read. It's all about the hubris of humanity. So, this book's about the hurricane that destroyed Galveston, Texas in 1900, and about Isaac Klein, who was the meteorologist for the U.S. Weather Bureau in Galveston at the time. And it's about the Weather Bureau, and it's about how people are stupid, basically. It really is about how people are so about what their neighbor thinks that they're willing to die for it. So what's going on in this novel at the turn of the century is that the U.S. Weather Bureau is getting its start, right? But at the time, meteorologists don't quite understand weather as well as we do now. I think we all take it for granted how predictive the weather can be. That, you know, as a surfer, they can predict the swell like 2 weeks out. Like, we can get advanced weather warnings. Satellites are tracking hurricanes and all this stuff. Well, there was none of that. And hurricanes in the West Indies, aka the Caribbean, and the southern part of the United States were a big problem because they had the ability to just come out of nowhere and sink navies. And so the Weather Bureau is really kind of like an arm of the military in the sense of they need to know what the weather's doing so that their navies aren't getting sunk. And at the time, a hurricane could do more damage to a navy than an opposing navy could. Like, it was a big deal all the way from the time that Columbus was there. So part of the Weather Bureau at the time was full super chicken to say when anything was going to really happen because they were afraid they were going to look stupid. And there were all sorts of people, it becomes politics, that didn't want to spend the money on the Weather Bureau because they said it was stupid. And so all these bureaucrats at the time were basically covering up weather. And so in Cuba, for this particular storm, in Cuba, there was a bunch of, the Cubans were super on it. They like pioneered hurricane forecasting. But the Cubans who were doing the hurricane forecasting were doing it like out of a monastery, dude. It was what the monks thought their, like, part of their responsibility was to know when the storms came. How times have changed, right? So the monks were super hip up at this Belon observatory and knew what was going on with the storms, but because of politics, and the telegraph lines were just going at the time, and telephones had just gotten going, the U.S. Weather Bureau had the Western Union shut down the cable, the ability to send telegrams to these observers. And the storm had come to Cuba, and these guys were like, there's a giant hurricane coming, and it had gone out into the Gulf of Mexico, and they lost track of it. And so the real gist of this novel is that human beings have a tendency to think they know everything. And because they know everything, they inflict their false sense of knowledge on everybody around them. So this guy and a lot of the people of Galveston thought they knew better, right? And instead of like sounding the alarm because they didn't want to look stupid, they didn't sound the alarm. And this guy was actually kind of knew what was going on because when a hurricane comes, and it came directly at Galveston, the leading edge of it caused like a huge swell, like perfect surf, dude. The surf must have been pumping the day before this hurricane showed up. And they're talking about how the surf's pumping and the whole thing. And this guy knows enough to be like, there's something up. But the rest of the Weather Bureau won't relay the messages that there's some big trouble going on. And basically, Galveston was built at sea level because people thought that was a good idea at the time, because at the time in the late 1800s there was this mindset that man had the ability to strong arm Mother Nature, that man was stronger than Mother Nature, and that Mother Nature couldn't battle man's ingenuity. So they had some like seawall and nonsense, but they really didn't think that Galveston was in danger because, might is right. It's no different than today. And so when the storm comes, the storm surge comes, and everybody's like playing around like, ooh, neat, and they're like hanging out, and then the storm starts hitting and starts leveling stuff. And instead of people like evacuating to the center of the city where the strong buildings were, they thought the smart move was to go man their house, to stay in their house because no storm's going to knock down our house type of mentality. And they all died. Like anywhere between they don't really know, but anywhere between 5 and 10,000 people drowned that night in the storm surge, because the storm came up to and all the houses in Galveston at the time were on pilings. So they came up to the second and third story. I think the storm surge was 15 feet. And I'm getting a text message. That's why I lost my train of thought. And so these people drowned in their houses like rats. And it goes on to basically Galveston was wiped off the map, and they just had to burn the bodies, and it was destroyed. And they rebuilt Galveston, but they put a seawall up. Galveston gets hammered all the time, man. And the real underlying, I almost tied into the chemtrails video I made is, look, dude, this book is about the government covering up weather because they didn't want to look stupid. That's basically it. They didn't want to, the guys running the U.S. Weather Bureau didn't want to lose their funding in Washington, so wouldn't sound the alarm that there was a hurricane coming. And they didn't sound the alarm, and a bunch of people died. In a nutshell. It's a good read. It was a page turner. I think I cranked this out in 5 days. But you know what the one big problem is? There's no pictures. There's one map in the beginning and one kind of cheesy map of Galveston, but there's no pictures. And so I'm reading the notes, and what are you going to do, man? It's already published. It's already out there. But I'm reading the notes, and it talks about how there's roughly 4,000 pictures in Galveston in some archives of Galveston and post-Galveston, before and after the storm. There's not one picture in this book except this one, dude. And it kind of sucks because there's a point where they're talking about the picture and how this is the Isaac guy, Isaac Klein, how they might have actually gotten the picture of all the destruction with this dude looking for his dead wife. Anyway, yeah, this guy loses his wife. And he talks about the picture, and I'm like, why didn't you put the picture in the book? It's my big beef with historical literature is if you don't include pictures and maps. Yeah, I have a pretty visual mind, but for those of us who don't have a visual mind, who can't do that, pictures really help. And I'm a map geek, man. So when I get into this and they start talking about stuff related to maps, yeah, that's the map I got. Yeah, super helpful. Right. Yeah, this is the map I got at Galveston. Yeah, I can barely read the legend here, but whatever. It's a big problem, but it's a good read and it's interesting because I think we face that same thing now. I think we really need to look back, not even at the far history of humanity, just at the 1800s, and realize that we've already made most of the mistakes, and yet instead of learning from them, we're just repeating them. So, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, man. I'm not listening to people that tell me I'm stupid for not listening to them. That's why all these people in Galveston died. This guy knows, man. He knew. He fucked up. And that's the thing, man. Like, you gotta think for yourself, dude. You gotta think for yourself. This book is all about the government really is not to be trusted. If you really read the underlying message it hands out, is basically saying that if you were not hip enough to sense danger and you were relying on the U.S. Weather Bureau and the United States government to say, hey, it's time to evacuate, you died. Basically. So, you know, you want to sit around and wait for the United States government to, like, tell you what's good and what's bad. You're not listening to your gut, man. Just saying. Dude, anything coming out of the White House is a lie at this point. So, you know, Trans-Pacific Partnership, good idea. Vaccines, good idea. Monsanto, thumbs up. Yeah, dude. War with Russia, that's a brilliant idea, man. Let's go bomb Libya, bomb Syria. You know, let's put fluoride in the drinking water. Hey, you know what? We don't need to fix our bridges. We don't need to fix the railroad. Now I'm going political rant. I was just doing a book review. I'm going to tune it down. I think this is a super worthwhile read. Erik Larson, I'm a big fan of Erik Larson. I've read a number of Erik Larson books, and one of them's The Devil in the Garden, dude, about the ambassador in Germany in 1936. Super, super duper informative about history and hubris. And I believe he also did White Lightning or The Devil in the White City, one of those, man. But I'm a big fan of Erik Larson, man. So anytime you can get a handle on Erik Larson's words, they fill your mind. And that's what this is all about. Fill your mind!